Today we have Brittany Ratelle here with us. And Brittany, if you're not watching this, behind her, she has a phrase, legally legit, which I love so much because she has done such an incredible job. She's an attorney, which is just so cool to me anyways, but she has done such an amazing job really branding herself in what she does. And she has really niched down to this creative small businesses, working for people like me, which is so awesome. And I think the first time I met you, you were wearing a pattern skirt that had like the copyright symbol on the fabric. Is that true?
It's true. I call it my La La Land skirt, and I made
Okay.
it for Alt Summit because Alt, if anyone knows, gone to that conference, you can't be too extra for Alt. And
No,
so
never.
I decided, you know what? I'm just going to really lean into this. And so my sister is a fashion designer. She does custom bridal gowns. And I was
Yes,
like, hey,
amazing
can you
one.
design me fabric that will print on Spoonflower that has like copyrights and trademarks and like contracts on it and make it pink and red? And she was like, of course, that's a normal ask from your sister for sure. And then I made it into a skirt because I like to sew. So I
Okay,
made it
hold
to
on.
a
I
big
did not know you
fluffy
designed the
skirt.
fabric too.
Yeah, she designed the fabric, and then you order it from
You can order it from
Spoonflower, and then
Soonflower.
I made
Okay.
it into a skirt and threw like a big giant red petticoat underneath it.
I mean, that
Because
was years and years ago, but clearly it made quite the impression on me because I was like, she is a genius. Because, and what it did, I think me seeing you in that was not like, oh, she is an attorney, so she's really smart and she can help me, but also it took it to the level of like identifying with creatives because you had a whole vision. And so actually that silly skirt, as silly as it might have seemed, built credibility and trust for you with me in just knowing that like you get it, that it's like a whole package deal. It's not just like a what do you know? Did you pass the bar? Like, are you smart? Who have you worked for? It literally was like, oh, she's like us.
right.
Does that make
Well,
sense?
thank you. No, it totally does. Because actually one of my brand values that I try to, infuse into all my content and all my offerings and services that I do is being approachable. And that
Okay.
for me, that's really important because I feel like that's where legal in general has failed a lot of
Mm,
people. And I think especially women entrepreneurs in general has tried to justify being very distant and putting
mm.
yourself up in the ivory tower, and you could not possibly understand what I'm hoping to solve for you, and that's why you need to pay me whatever exorbitant thing I'm going to quote you, and make it all seem really scary. And that always has rubbed me the wrong way. And so I always want me, myself, and the solutions I'm offering to be really approachable.
That is so fascinating and so true because it's almost like when people have a degree in something, they feel like they have to use a different language that you can't understand to prove their
Right.
credibility.
Yeah, to prove like, see, this is why, you have to, because I'm
Oh,
so I'm
wow.
so above you. And really, it should be about, well, what value am I bringing to you? What problems am I helping you solve? And that
And
should
also, how
kind of
can I
speak for
help you
itself.
understand what we're gonna do together?
Exactly. And a good practitioner, and I think a good
Mm.
lawyer and advisor should be able to do that, because I'm your counselor and your friend. And I should be helping advise you from your choices, because all legal analysis is all about analyzing risk. We joke that the most lawyer answer is it depends. And it's true, because it's very rarely right, like one yes and clear bright lines. It's about like, well, here's some exposure and here's some options and this could happen, and what do you feel, and what's your vision for the future, and what's an appropriate level of risk that you want to have as a business owner, because all business has some risk. So
Yeah, and you wanna know what I love so much is that you are so clear about what it is that you do and what you want the experience to be like. I think that's an amazing you put it into words so well, what I have actually observed of you and in my experience of, like, conversation or asking questions or learning. Like, I get all that from you. That's totally what I get, and the fact that you were able to, like, articulate that with words tells me how clear you are with what your offering is, and also shows me why you are as successful as you are.
well, thank you. Gosh, you can just keep saying that to
No,
me all day.
no, it's
I'm like
really
my
true, though.
Enneagram 3 just keeps that up. So
Oh boy, we're gonna rein her back in. No, just kidding. But the reason why I wanted to point that out is because like anyone listening, if you have an offer for someone, could you on the spot, like you just did, I give you one little piece of like, I liked your skirt. And then you were able to explain the details behind all of your, intentions and offerings and why and what and how. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I feel like that I got through that process and started understanding why, it's like you trying to unpack like why am I showing up the way I am online or the way I talk to people, and then trying to see what are the underlying messages that are repeatable, and that are more scalable, and then you communicate with people. And I feel like going and doing, I think of the work that like, at Allison's brand school, like workshop helped that, and reading Simon Sinek, and also having trusted people that you could bounce ideas off or help to kind of shape what that looks like, and understand, why are you doing what you do, and how does that show up in the world, and is that all, being cohesive to the way that you want to run your business. So
Absolutely. Okay, so not only is she an attorney, but she is, do you prefer the word lawyer or attorney?
They're both great. So I think I think I probably use attorney more, but I mean lawyer. They're both awesome, and they're both legally correct. Some people
Yeah,
ask if
okay,
there's a
that's
difference
good.
in between. There are not. In England, there is a difference between like a barrister and a solicitor. They have a
Oh,
different system in terms of their legal licensing, and
okay.
you also have to wear the wig, which I think that would be a challenge for me, artistically wise.
Or
It's
or you would take it and run with
or
it.
a great opportunity.
Yes, that's so
Yeah,
great.
for
Okay,
sure. But we
that's
don't
good
we don't
into
do that here. So
yes,
it's all the
okay.
same. Yeah.
So she is, an attorney and she's also a mother of 4. How old are your kids?
So I've got my girls are 12 and 10. And then I have boys that are 7 and 6. So
So
busy.
fun.
Yeah.
Did you know anyone who was an attorney growing up?
My uncle was an attorney. He did estate planning. But that's kind of the closest in my family. A lot of people have asked if my dad or even assumed my dad was an attorney
Mm.
because he was a business guy and he was a master negotiator. He actually did mergers and acquisitions for
Oh, wow.
media deals in the
So
90s.
cool.
And so he did, and definitely the way he thinks and analyzes deals and the questioning, certainly he could have gone to law school and been an awesome attorney. But he didn't have to do that. He figured out another way to use his talents and crafts. But it's something that I was interested in. I did debate. I was a huge debate nerd in high school. I was on the debate team for all 4 years. I was a cheerleader and a debater. So I say I was like a high school paradox.
That is amazing. Yes, I love
I,
it.
in fact, once I went straight from like a game and I was like in my cheer uniform and I had to bring my clothes like on with me on the bus and then try to get like my suit on and my pantyhose because you had to dress up in like, professional stuff for, and I was like, this is an interesting moment here. So I knew that law school was maybe an option, but I just was pretty sure I was going to do some sort of graduate school after undergrad. So yeah, but law school wasn't ever for sure until really I finished. My undergrad was in communications PR, and I thought, I should just see and start talking to people. And I was doing an internship with the State Department in Mozambique, and there were all these ex-attorneys there, and they were all like, "Oh, between these options, of public health or public policy or law school, go to law school." And I'm like, "That speaking like you guys aren't practicing anymore." Like
Yeah.
says the people who have left the practice and are now, working on their Portuguese, living overseas. But they said, "No, go to law school. You'll get the best training. People will take you seriously, and even if you don't want to practice, you'll never regret it. You'll get, incredible writing, critical, reasoning, thinking." And I thought, okay, that jives with me. And so I went to law school.
That's really cool. And it's also a big commitment with the open-ended of like, maybe I'll practice, maybe I won't.
Right. Yeah. And I did going open ended because I worked for a year for a law firm in between undergrad and while I was getting ready for law school because I needed to then take the LSATs. There's lots of prep that you kind of have to do beforehand in terms of admissions. And I worked for a law firm in Salt Lake, Jones Waldo. So yeah, and I liked working there, but the attorneys were really unhappy. A lot of the
Mm.
successful attorneys. It's like I saw they had beautiful cars in the garages, and they had amazing houses up in Park City. But their day to day, especially the women in the firm, they were stressed out all the time, just
Interesting.
constantly.
Why would you think that the women would be more stressed out?
I found like and it definitely seems like the work life balance was still, lip service. It was on the firm website and there was like, a women's lawyer committee division. But in terms of their opportunities to work flexibly and to have off ramps and on ramps in their career progress was still very challenging and really difficult.
Mm.
And that's, and not to throw Jones Wald under the bus,
No,
that's hard across all law
totally. I
and
get
all
that.
big
Yeah.
law. Is
I had a
just like,
conversation with Sunny
yeah,
Washington a few weeks ago, and she talks about the difference between having a child in like the tech industry. Her first daughter and her second daughter are like 16 years apart. And
right.
so the difference between even just from then till now of how different it just was, right? And thankfully, I think that we're seeing some improvement in that. So
Yeah, I think one of the silver linings of COVID was really pushing people into certainly being more comfortable with remote work and
yes.
understanding that like having someone be a good team member and contributing does not mean but in a chair or in this chair in this office during these
Hmm.
hours. And so I think that's really good to push back on that in terms of productivity can look a lots of different ways. But certainly there's a big tradition in law, just like in accounting or in consulting world is the same way that like there's really only one track if you want to rise up in your career, and you go work and you're a grunt after you graduate and you do whatever is passed to you for years and years, and then you hope that you
Mm.
make partner and rise up. And that was the option. And for me, that was never tempting at all. So I knew going into law school that whatever I was going to do with my degree, it wasn't going to be that.
And you're going to pave your own way.
Yeah.
Which I love. That's maybe one of my favorite things about you is that you have taken a very like, normal career. Like there's a lot of attorneys out there. And you took it and you have 1,000,000% made it your own and your own path and have found great success. And I think that's incredible and such a good example to people who, sometimes we have to step out into the dark and be the ones to turn the lights on for everyone else.
Right. Yeah. No, it's it is. And thank you for that. I mean, I feel like that's humbling words, but yeah, for me, it just and I really just had trust, and I considered it that it was going to be probably a really a spiritual journey in terms of being open to the universe. And for
Mm.
me as a person of faith, that there was going to be a plan, and I really felt confirmed that I was supposed to go to law school, and that even though I didn't know what the path looked like, and in terms of fitting that in with a family and a life and a career and making that investment of time and energy worth it, that something was going to be revealed to me in time if I was patient enough and just worked hard.
Brittany, I love that you brought that up because that is something that I am like always trying to do. And something that feels so important to me is like we don't always have all the steps. And sometimes when we like to, sometimes when we
Right.
we like a little bit of control, we like to plan, we like to feel prepared, we like, certainty, all those things. And I one day I was like feeling this. I was like, I know the first step. But
Right.
then after that, it feels like completely dark. Like I have no idea. And I
Mhm.
had the thought come to me like, if you can trust yourself when you see the big picture that you are going to be able to know how to get there, then you can trust yourself in one step. And then all you have to do is trust yourself again in another step and
Yep.
another step. Like you don't actually need the whole big picture because the trust is the same, whether you have one yes or one no or 15
Absolutely.
light out. And I was like, oh, okay. So it goes back to just
No, I could not agree with that more. And as someone who's seen that reflected in my own life and also seen that with the hundreds of entrepreneurs that I've worked with in my practice of it really is. I think if it's like frozen got it, it's the next right thing, and
Mhm.
and trying to see what's the next choice that I need to make and being thoughtful and introspective about that, but not taking the fact that you don't see the whole vision and elucidated and that whole path is like some divine or universal signal of like, oh, you've got it wrong and you're a
Mhm.
fool or
Mhm.
you're too risky or any other word that we want to throw at a pejorative, because that's how everyone does it. That is how everyone does it.
It's
Is
so true.
because
It
even
is
if
so
you did
true.
have a whole picture, it's likely it would probably change. And many
Yeah.
roads lead to Oz. And so
Yeah,
you're not looking for the right path, you're looking for the next right step for you. And that's a really important
absolutely.
distinction.
11 years ago, you've been practicing law for 11 years. So,
Yes.
right? Okay,
So yeah,
so
so graduated from law school, still wasn't sure what I was going to do. And but I knew some things. I had crossed some more things off my list, which is sometimes even more helpful, right? To know like you don't want to do. Knew I wanted a family and really felt like it was time for that. And so I was pregnant my last year of law school. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to take some classes and try to intern in areas of things that I could do on my own, like be a solo. And so I did family law and estate planning. And there were ones that you don't need a huge team. You can, fit in smaller clients, people that match up with your skills, and you can support and serve them. So I did that for many years and learned lots of great lessons and help people. And there's, there's good things about that and really hard things, especially in family law. It can be really challenging emotionally being in that
Yeah,
work, day in
absolutely.
and day out. And because yeah, people are in crisis and they're sad. And and it's hard being with people sometimes in the worst chapter of their life and guiding them through that. But that's also reason why you need good people who care and who want to show up there. And I love doing adoptions. That was my favorite part. But I always did feel like in the back of my mind, nagging, there's something else coming. There's something else you're supposed to be doing, and thinking about it and tinkering about it and praying about it. And so I did for years, really. And in that meantime, I had friends keep reaching out who said, hey, you're a lawyer, right? I know you don't do this, but I just got this contract and for a deal, and I want, can you read over it and sign it? Or do I need to become an LLC? Or what are the rules about copyright? I want to share this quote on my thing. Can I put this on my bag? Can I do this? Can I do that?
Because really you're in this stage where social media didn't exist as it does
Right.
now, right? So it's coming out and literally everyone's like, what do we what can I do? What don't I do? What do I do? What
Right.
do I
It's the
need?
rise
Like,
of the mommy blogger turning into the influencer. And all the first influencers were, most of them were mommy bloggers. And I happened to know enough people and have, people like Melanie Burke and Allison Faulkner who knew lots of people who were in this space, and they would introduce me and be very generous in passing around
mhm.
my name. And then it really was in like 2017. I just had my last baby because he was born in like December. And so it's like, okay, coming out of like newborn fog, I finally found like, Britt, you've gotten your answer. This is exactly what you need to be doing.
Mm,
It was time for me to be brave enough to draw a line in the sand. And I actually
mm.
was curious. So I looked up, I sent this email in August of that year. I titled it, the subject line was womaning up. And I said, friends, I am womaning up and asking for your help in spreading the love from my legal resources for creatives, entrepreneurs. Perhaps I'll help you, perhaps I'll help others. After working for a couple of years, I'm starting a new Instagram account. Here are some resources. And it was basically like my first like lead magnets, a little mini course about FTC stuff, a legal cheat sheet guide, and, link to my Instagram. And I sent that email out to everyone I knew, and it was terrifying.
Well, because all of a sudden now these peers, these friends, you essentially you were going to say like, I have to charge you money for my
Right.
services, right? And that
I'm
can
saying
be
I do this now. Yeah.
right,
This
and that
is,
can be
this is a
super
real thing.
scary to
Yeah.
start asking for money. In fact, actually, when the subscription option came out, I had someone write me and it's like $2.99 a month. And I
Right.
thought to myself, like, I have a lot of people who want coaching, but they can't necessarily afford like one-on-one coaching with me. And so I was like, oh, this could be really fun opportunity. Like we could have like more, like a group coaching setting where that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm answering questions. And like to me, it felt like this is a great idea. And then I had someone come to me like, you're so greedy. It's all about the dollar. Like you can't even show up on
Oh,
Instagram without asking for money anymore. And I was like, no, actually nothing's changing on my Instagram. So, but there is always a
but
risk
those
when you're
messages are killer. And especially for some people, like they can honestly, they can sink a business, and they can, and they can
interesting.
reverberate in your head. And if like, even though I had the opportunity to help hundreds of people and get positive feedback, you get one of those and you're like, it's all your worst fears, maybe about yourself,
Well,
coming
but
into
also
them.
you have to go back to like, am I really ripping anyone off? And
Right.
if they're my friends, they know the work that I've put into this, that they should
Exactly.
actually want to pay me double for my
Mhm.
services or my goods because they want to support me. They love me. They see how hard I work. They know my value. They're going to not just pay me, but they're going to also tell their friends to pay me. Right. So there's like that. But I think initially when you're stepping into a place where you are asking for money, there's that like panic of, and luckily when this person responded to me with that, I was like, oh, like it's interesting that you see it like that. It actually felt very generous way for me to be able to offer my coaching services at such a low price point for people who want more reach. That's all, But in the beginning, especially when you're turning it into that, and I can see why that would make you feel afraid.
Right. I mean, I see, and but that just shows, I think, why you are so good at helping people is because you've done the work for yourself to be in a place where you can not only speak to that and have the language to understand where you are, and also know that like, no, I've got myself, and that core is safe. And so those things, you kind of let them slide off of you in terms of being flappable. Because I think for especially people early, and I think this is especially pernicious for women, I think our strengths are sometimes used against us, and so
Absolutely.
our strength of like empathy and wanting to help so much and
Like
making
we're
it
you
all,
were you were
other people
created to
comfortable.
save everyone else.
Yes. And so to have that turned against you, to be like, well, that's too much and I can't afford that, and making that your problem instead of just a circumstance, to feel neutral about, of like, that's, I'm sorry, but for the people that I need to help, and also because I can't have burnout, I need to be making money at this,
Because it's all an
absolutely.
energy exchange, right?
Exactly.
Like we know that and you can understand that. And if you are in any sort of business where you're asking for money, you know that there's an energy exchange that happens. And anytime you actually, I'm sure you've experienced this when you felt like, oh, I guess I should really help this person. I'll do it for free or whatever.
Right.
Typically, those are the situations that actually come back to bite you in whatever way. It's like,
100%.
I'm like, it's like when I try to, I'll be like, oh, I'll just bring your order home for you. I'll just
Yeah.
bring it home, and then I forget that to bring the order home, and I was just trying to do something nice, but then it's like, it's like when you.
But it's this weird thing, and I've totally found the same thing, and I'm like, because I went outside my system, and I'm like, I have a good
Mm,
system of taking care of my clients, and I move them through. But the
mhm,
few times that I've dabbled and helping friends and
mhm.
family, and they wanted a deal and it wasn't in like the firm system, yeah, that's when I think mistakes have happened. And because
It's
I
so
was like,
true.
I didn't treat them like a real client,
Mhm.
on both ways, and that hurt them and it hurt me.
And that's actually really, really, really important to hear. You say, "They didn't treat me the same, and I didn't treat them the same." So
Yeah.
when we're asking for like, so say if we're not the person who's giving the deal, say we're hoping and asking for a deal, that you're asking for someone to lower their energy that they would normally give, even if they don't do it intentionally, even if
Right.
they have full intention of showing up, the energy level drops because you're no longer valuing them the same that someone else is. And so it just naturally has to happen that way. And so just know that, what do I actually want from that? Like, do I want to
Yeah.
hire them at the max energy potential that they can offer? Or do am I okay that I'm truly going to get less than, because I'm giving less of my energy to them.
For sure, in the deal. And just to be honest, I mean, so much comes out to being honest with yourself and that
Mhm,
communication. And otherwise, because you have resentment. And I've
mhm.
had, and like all these things, it's so much easier to give advice than to
Oh,
take our own medicine,
absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Because I've told clients, when they've like, hey, I want to do this trade with a friend, or we're doing this, and like, is that okay? And I'm like, I'm not gonna say like never do trades, because there's a place for trade. There is a
Mhm,
place for working for exposure. I'm not going to poo
mhm.
poo that, because I know that that's part of the business journey.
There's some
But I
value
say,
in
what I
some exposure.
recommend is still invoice them, and even write on the invoice, this is what the normal cost is. And that
Mhm.
way they know, and this is what the exchange is looking like, because they could not know of, like, I had no idea a branding package costs 5 grand.
Yep,
And
it's
they
so true.
thought like they were giving you a deal by throwing you a couple hoodies or something, so that's the thing. You
Just to
want
be
to
very clear, I did not offer her 2 hoodies, okay? That was
No, I'm
not me.
sure. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes,
that's why it really helps clarify expectations and boundaries, and helps preserve relationships, because a lot of people, when they're not in your business and not in your trenches, they just don't know how much things cost in terms of time and energy. And so it's hard for them to not you to resent that trade, unless there's clarity. And you have to work at that, and it can
absolutely.
seem even slightly awkward. Oh well.
Well, and the interesting thing too about you, and I think that I understand this because so much of what you do is like intellectually. And so it's things that you have learned, and it's not,
Right.
so sometimes I could see how people would be like, it will take you 5 minutes. Like, what do you
Right.
mean? You want to charge, what do you mean it costs $1,500 or it costs five hundred
Yeah.
dollars? Like, isn't this like, it's like when you're a photographer and they're like, can you just take some snapshots, and you're like, no, it's not about that. It's truly, I mean, you spent years in law school. You continued your education constantly. You've had
Right.
so many different businesses that you've worked with and people and all of those things. So truly, it is growing yourself so that you can help people like skip over years and years and years of that growth
Of heartache and
to
headaches,
have,
yeah.
yeah, to
And
have
that
with
took
you.
me years and years and so much time and energy to develop. And you're right. And I think that's such a great analogy to the photographer, because I was debating with a family member even this week, because they were like in mini sessions, and they were like, it was $100 for 15 minutes. And I was like, there's, first of all this work on the back end that you don't see, and anyone who's not a
Mhm.
photographer, but like the
Right.
editing and the cost of the camera and all of
The cost
that
of the
stuff.
camera.
And so,
Yes.
and like it's like that great story about Picasso, where he wrote on a napkin, and if someone's like $100,000 and they're like, what? That took you 30 seconds. No, that took me 50 years to be able to
Mhm.
do in 30 seconds. That's what you're paying for. So
Yep. And this is so good for consumers, but also for creators. or
Absolutely.
coaches or teachers to recognize the effort that you have put in and the time and the value that comes from that. Like it's really truly priceless in so many situations, but also like we want to label everything like 1 hour is worth
Yeah, we want to
$10.
commoditize
One,
it, Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Yes, we want to do that with everything. And honestly, it just doesn't work for any
yeah.
type of field that we're in like this. So
Yeah, in terms of one-on-one work, you have to be really careful about that and walk that fine line because I also am a big fan of like transparency and pricing, and I've
yep,
seen that so much because so many people are afraid of working with a lawyer, even one like me who tries to throw in as much pink as humanly possible on an Instagram account,
and I love it.
because they think that the unknown legal like billable hours is the scariest thing in the world. Like maybe as soon as I start DMing Brittany, she's like going to start charging me and sending me a bill. That's never happened. It never will happen. But I get that it seems scary and afraid. And so, how much do you have to share and educate and make people feel comfortable and feel like they can have ownership and, be in the driver's seat and making good choices. So
That's so good. Okay, so you see this need, you send out the email, and then tell me what it looks like after that.
after that, I mean, it's slow going, right? I wish I could tell you it was overnight success. It wasn't, but it was slow growth. I shared and I tried to share as much as possible, and I still do for free. So I'm putting out resources on Instagram. I start a podcast also because hello, I love to talk, and so
Yeah.
that's a natural fit for me to be able to share tips about things and also be able to have my friends over and share about their businesses and their wins and what's going on and what we're doing and structuring their businesses so that they can grow to these next cool offerings that they want to have. And it really has hit where I've been now full time. I mean, supporting my family really even the last year as my husband has had to step away from working with his dad, and they were doing stuff in mental health, and then he got a cancer diagnosis
Mm,
that rocked our family, and I've just been so grateful that I was able to grow this business in a place where it could support our family, give my
yeah.
husband space to figure out what he wants to do with next steps, and also to be able to help now. I mean, when I look through my client files, literally hundreds of women
So
that I've
cool.
helped, yeah, and achieve
And
their dreams. And I love that I
yeah.
get to be a small part of that, of them feeling called and being able to achieve what they were called to do.
Well, and the thing that I love about you educating people is because I think that the women or the men or the small businesses that you work with, typically they actually don't know what they need. And I
Right.
at least that's been true for me. It's like I like my call with you. I'm like, I have no idea what I need. And I see you as like, I don't want you to know what you need when there it's a problem, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't want to only know what we need when the problem arises. And I still to this day feel like, oh gosh, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. But you are so good at putting out that free content like you talk about. Your podcast as a resource to be able to teach people what they need. And then you also have the resources of being able to execute it and implement that into their business to protect them for all of their needs.
Right. Yeah. Cause I really, when I explain to people, I love, cause more people are more familiar with like the medical monocle. And I'm like, I don't love to be an ER doctor, but sometimes I do. Sometimes people are in a crisis and there's stuff that needs to happen and I can come and help you. Ideally, I love to be a yoga teacher and
Oh,
a,
that's so
and
good.
a, and a
Yeah.
chiropractor. And I want us to check in and I want to give you some things that can help you have your legal house in order and have good legal hygiene around the way, as you're building a business that's maybe a non-traditional business that looks different than what your dad and your uncles and other businesses that you've seen or what you even maybe learned about in school, and that's okay. But it means that you might need to be doing more work to seek out resources and making sure this is what you're doing at this milestone. When you're hiring someone, you need to be doing this. If you're offering this kind of in-person event, these are some things you need to be thinking about because it's just
Mm.
more risk and more exposure. And that's the role that I love to be in. And that's why now I have kind of, for people who maybe don't need one-on-one and custom legal help, I have all of my digital resources, my templates, where I'm
So
like,
many. You
look,
have so many
yeah,
digital
like the stuff in
resources.
your website footer. You don't need me to custom draft that. You don't need to be. And I've had people who are like, "Oh, I paid someone, a firm thousands of dollars," and I'm like, "Oh, that makes me
You're
so
like,
sad
stop
because you
it.
didn't
Yeah.
you didn't need to, And it's not to say, like what's screwing people or whatnot, but manipulating. But save that money. There's other things that I'll tell you. That's what you save, your legal, your legal funds for. Not this, not for a simple release for an event, not for hiring your first, photographer, and you just want to make sure that they're not going to screw you and that you can use the
Hmm.
logo. you know?
Yeah, no, that's so good. And what happens when you see someone taking their business seriously? Like when you see someone who's like comes to like hire you and they're like, okay, I, I think I need this, or do I need this? And they come to you, like, what are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's the best feeling in the world. I live for that. That's my favorite thing, is to have someone who has an idea, has a passion, and is now ready. And they're almost asking for permission to take themselves seriously. And I want to turn that back, because I'm like, first, you're the only one who really needs to believe in you to take yourself seriously. But if taking care of these things makes you feel safe and confident and ready to greet the world and do it, then let's go. And here's what we're going to do, and we're going to get you ready. And now you feel proud and confident to be able to move forward with that offering, that launch, that book, that event, that membership, that product. And it's awesome. And I love being part of having people being able to own and step into, their confident entrepreneur space.
That's yeah, that's so true. And I think a lot of us like keep ourselves so small in our own mind. Like one, because then if there is any sort of like failure, maybe it feels less like, oh, it's just like a thing, it's like,
Right. Yeah.
and what's failure, but or if people like decide to, not do what they're doing anymore or change their way, like it's easier to just be like, oh, that little thing, but the second that
Right.
you see that it's something that you want to scale and grow and take serious, and you invest in the business, it becomes more serious and it becomes
Right.
more legit, like you say. And I honestly think then there's that energy that you put into your business from even just taking care of like the legal side of things.
Right.
So I also have been in the situation where I truly wasn't intentionally growing a business. Like I joke all the time that I just wanted to be able to buy the clearance shirts at Old Navy for my twins without having to like ask permission or
Right.
explain the charge.
That's
Just
like
like,
you, and that's like what Susan says all the time. She just wanted to be able to walk into Target
right, about
and
whatever
get what
she
she wanted
wanted.
and not check with anyone. And it's like every woman I've ever talked to is like, I know exactly what she's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's literally what I was like, okay,
Yeah.
great. I can like make a few dollars here and there. And then what happened was that my business continued to grow, but also so did my home responsibilities and my children and all of these things. And
Right.
so I'm like growing, and all of a sudden I have like this big business, and then I'm like pregnant, and then my nephew dies, and like all these things. And all along my husband's like even been saying like, don't commingle your money ever.
Yep.
And then the
Smart man.
IRS
Yeah.
comes and they're like, looks like you've been commingling your money. And I'm like, you're right. Like, I'm like, I've done my, I've taken my bit, like, I've paid my taxes and I claimed everything and I have all my invoices in here. And it's like, but you didn't follow the law of this little tiny
Keeping
thing
things separate,
of
Yeah.
keeping
And
things
guess what?
separate.
The IRS doesn't care about your good intents.
And they're
They
like
don't.
actually the rudest people in the world.
They are.
And they're ruthless. And I also
Either does like state workforce services. So if you are doing unemployment insurance, or you're supposed to be paying someone and they say they're an employee and you say they're a 1099, they also don't care and are also quite rude. So,
literally. And so that's the thing. And so then I was at this stage too where I was like so overwhelmed with the business, with my family, with all the things that like it didn't even feel like the work. It didn't even feel worth it to try to fight what was happening.
yeah.
It was just like, okay, what do you want from me? Here, have everything. And now looking back, I'm like, that was so stupid. But the reason why I even bring this up is because once you start something, assuming that it's going to turn into and like way to go me for drawing attention to the IRS, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
it's like we'll be
You
like,
were
okay,
doing
great.
well. Yeah. You're a victim of your own success,
Yeah,
really.
apparently, but
Yeah.
like I think the thing that I see in the services that you offer for people is like when you start something, assume that it is going to get you in a place where you're going to be having, partnerships, where you're going to be having guests, where you're going to have employees, where people are going to be visiting your website and signing up for things, and
Right.
that it's going to need those things. And from experience, and I'm also speaking to myself again because I know there's other things that I need to be doing, but from from experience, it is better to be ahead of the game than to be like, oh crap, I really wish I would have done A, B, C, or D to protect myself from being in this situation.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, that's the thing, is to build a house that can grow, and it's not like everyone needs to assume like, I'm going to have like this giant
No.
mega empire and I need to spend, thousands and thousands of dollars on legal right now, because I think that's a mistake too. I think there's like an
Yeah,
appropriate level of risk and
I
things you have to
agree.
do. And it should be step by step. But I agree with you in that, what if it all works out like terrifically well, beyond your wildest imaginations? You want to make sure that you've treated yourself as seriously as you like other people too, so you can bring the value that you feel called to bring.
Well, and just listening to like going to your free resources on your Instagram page, like that might turn on a light bulb of like, oh, I didn't even realize that that was an option for me, or that I should do that, or that that's part of it. Like I've had many of those moments with you, like learning from you on Instagram and just being like, I didn't even like consider that. Or like,
Yeah.
oh,
And
wow,
that's
that's
what I
good
hope is
information.
like, yeah, just offering like, here's some questions to consider. Cause people was like, I don't even know what I don't know. And I'm like, I get it. Start with my free resources, like get my
Hmm.
legally legit workbook and start like
Hmm.
working through that of like, oh, this is bringing up some good questions about my contracts. And this person did this free thing for me and we never wrote anything down about it. And maybe, we should revisit that. And that's what
Yeah.
I hope is just for it to be, step by step, manageable, not someone hiding under their desk, of like, I can't ever figure this out. And so I can't move forward. And I don't have some special gene that I'm supposed to be a real business owner. Because I can
Mm.
tell you, having counseled and talked to people at even very high levels of financial success in their business as entrepreneurs, um, they're still afraid. They still feel like frauds sometimes. They still feel like imposters. It's something that everyone has to deal with, of like, or is that person going to stand up and finally call me out of like, you don't know what you're doing and you're, a
Mm.
fraud to all of us. So and that's just something we all have to navigate and walk with, in terms of fear being part of our lives, but it shouldn't be driving the car. You can like
Yeah,
ride
it's like a
shotgun. You can
passenger. It's
stay in your
yeah, it's a
lane.
passenger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's interesting that like fear and excitement feel the same in our bodies. And so
Right.
I think sometimes our brain tells us that it should be fear. Like you should this feels like this and you're doing something new and different. So
Right.
it should be fear. So notice this as fear when really you could say, maybe am I really excited about this?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
they
Just
feel
try
the same.
throwing that label on instead. Oh, I love that. I think that's such a great, a flip in terms of the script of like, what if,
Like,
this
of
is
course I
really
feel
just,
like this. I'm
yeah.
I'm really excited. It's new, it's different.
And
Who
you're
knows
right.
what's
I
gonna
have
happen?
never done this before. So you're right. I don't have any picture in my head of what that
Yeah.
looks like for me to now speak at this workshop, or for me to go on and to launch a course and to run ads on it. You're
Or
right.
to, like,
Never.
not be the attorney that you've seen all of your neighbors or your uncle or anyone else
Yeah.
be. Like, you paved that way for yourself and you didn't have all the answers. And now that you are here, this is my favorite thing to do is go, like, I'm looking at my life right now and I'm looking back, and what thoughts come to you if you never would have been courageous enough to build that path?
I mean, it breaks my heart to think, and I think, I am a believer that like there's many paths that we could take. I don't know if,
Absolutely.
if I believe like, oh, there was only one way,
No.
that I could have found ways to use my law degree to help other people, to help my family, and for all
Mhm.
of that to work out. But I'm just so grateful for the inspiration, my friend Melanie telling me, hey, you should start listening to Pat Flynn, because
Mm.
Susan had told her to listen to that. And
Mhm.
like, just those little things along the way that made it so I had this world open up to me, and that where people were doing exciting things, and that there was a new type of business and a new industry and niche opening up, and that there weren't people serving them. And
Yeah.
I was
Isn't that
positioned in
so
a
cool
place
that
where I could.
a new business opportunity on social media kind of opened up a whole new way for you to do your business?
Right. And it's crazy, right? Because I mean, I think some people foresaw, but no one saw like influencer marketing that was going to have this huge different impact on industry, and all this ad money was going to move off of print and off banner ads. I think of where all it was, and that Instagram channels are really going to become these new digital magazines. And that's what I still remind my clients when they are talking about like, well, what about this, and are feeling bad, especially when I'm trying to talk them into negotiating, pricing of like media usage, and like, what are they paying you for and how much are they going to be using it? And I'm like, think of you are your own digital magazine, and you have ads and you have editorial
Mhm.
content, and you are asking, and someone's asking you for access to that, or for some of that media, like that's
Yeah.
worth negotiating and having. And it's funny, I love the title of your podcast, because I say all the time that negotiation is like a dance, and so you
Oh,
shouldn't ever feel bad for putting
Love
out
that.
your first hand, because then it should be like, do you just want to dance? And that's all you're asking. Like, what's your budget? Are you interested in working with me? And then you start going back and forth. And it's not about you being greedy and manipulative and whatnot. It's just part of business. And that's okay.
And the dance is so fun, like the visual, and that's I think why I loved it for my podcast too much, is because when you take it into a visual form of like, oh, like it's like there's like movement, and it's like not like this black and white thing. And so
Right.
negotiation, it like seeing it like that is like, oh, well, what do you think? And what do you think? It feels so much less intimidating.
Right, exactly, yeah. And it's not yeah, it doesn't make it into this scary thing or this adversarial relationship necessarily that it
Mhm.
needs to. It's just there's flow and there's balance and there's, upbeats and downbeats and whatnot, and that's okay, and that's really
That's so
normal.
good.
And that's the way you chart someone's entrepreneurial journey. We all know, especially if someone gets on a podcast and like you can make it into this beautiful arc. But we all know in reality, like there's some highs and there's lows and there's a turn and up. There's, yeah, that product totally failed, and that business partner that I thought didn't work out, and then
Yeah.
and those are oh so common in that journey. And if you can learn to enjoy that ride and grow and appreciate that for what it is, then I think you'll be well set, because I entrepreneurial is like up a level adulting. It's like a graduate class of being an adult, and because it will stretch you in ways that really few other things could. So
It is absolutely the truth. I always like business feels like personal development
it is.
because it stretches you and it pushes you in just so many different ways that you never would have had the opportunity to grow otherwise.
Yeah, much like parenting. I feel like, yeah, if someone came to me and is like, I'm stuck, I want to grow as a person, I'd be like, start a business or have a kid.
It's so true. Okay, so in what ways have you seen your business help you grow personally?
This is a good question. So I feel like I've had to do a lot of work on myself to confront what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths, what are things that that you do throughout life, and you just kind of figure, oh, that's just the way I see the world. But when confronted and having to put yourself, especially in systems, they're made apparent now, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, now I do know that I know I'm an Enneagram 3, and that I really like to be liked, and I like to be respected and thought of as smart. And so, the way that plays out in my business is that I can kind of be easily flattered by some opportunities and be like, oh,
Mm,
that sounds awesome. And I need to slow down. And I'm a naturally pretty enthusiastic person,
yeah.
is to also be able to think, okay, so, but what is this asking in terms of my investment of time and energy? And to be realistic about that, because I'm usually pretty overly optimistic in how much I can fit in terms of time, and
Yep.
so my toxic trait on my calendar is I'll fill up a day an incredible amount. And I'm pretty
You're
good.
like,
Like,
I think I can actually do it.
I
And
really can get a lot done.
you probably can do it, but everything
But
comes with a cost.
should I? And is
Yes.
there a cost? Is there a cost to me
Yes.
and my marriage and my mothering and my friendships and all the other things that I want
This
to
is
have? But I think that's, that's the thing, is you do have to know and be like your ability to self-confront, and
yeah.
the times you have to do that has to grow in capacity if you want to be a successful business owner. So I think it's good, especially if you want to add in other, really fun curveballs like working with a spouse,
Yeah.
which I had to do in some projects, or working with other people close to you, or doing business with friends. Like we had talked about, that will stretch some other things in terms of, can you be clear about your boundaries and setting
Mm.
those up? And you have to be good about that if you want to preserve the relationship, and your communication skills. All that stuff has to up level, or you're going to keep on repeating the same mistakes, and life will keep on trying to teach you the same lesson until you finally get it.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the point of like confronting the things at the beginning. So I always, whenever anyone's going to charge for anything, I'm like, send the price first before you make any agreements, because
Yeah.
that's when it gets awkward. It's only awkward when you're like, go to check it, it's like you're done with a
Yeah.
photo shoot. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, that'll be $3,000. And you're like, they're like, what? And you're like, and so it's like, if anytime that
Yeah.
you have the opportunity to set those or those like conditions out front before you do any interactions. And I think that you learn that more and more like with experience. And
Right.
so
Absolutely.
So
And I
growing.
couldn't agree more. And that's my philosophy with having contracts, because I still
Mm,
get some pushback from people who are like, well, I don't want to use contracts. The language is so cold and whatnot. And I'm like, I can get that. I can go with you for a while and jive with that. But I said, here's the thing. I believe that contracts should very rarely contain, really never, like gotcha language. It should not be a surprise to what's in the contract. It should merely
mm,
be, we're going to have this a one-stop shop where you can look up that fine print and the details of what we expect that's already been covered on your website, in your product reviews, like in your onboarding, especially if you're doing like client work one-on-one, work with somebody. It should merely be a recitation of what you've already done to show up. This is how we're going to be working together. And this is what this relationship will unfold like, because that's really just good customer service. And that's
yeah.
going to serve you the best way possible of avoiding drama.
Well,
There's
and
enough drama in our life. Like keep it
yeah.
on like Real Housewives. Don't bring it into your business.
And honestly, like blame it on you, right? It's like
Right.
I have an attorney that I work with, and these are the things she requires of me to keep me safe.
Yep.
And whether that's if you need to blame it on Brittany or if you need to blame it
Absolutely.
for your
I
personal
happily take the
assistant,
fall. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
your
Exactly.
personal
Or
your personal
yeah.
assistant that you've
Yeah.
named and that you
Yeah.
act for sometimes, right? If you got to send it from a personal assistant, go ahead, remove yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Give yourself the
that's
distance you need, but setting up, those business boundaries are just, they're critical for preserving your peace and your sanity and, your sanity and just your value. And so that you can keep on showing up, helping people, because if you don't, there's a cost to that. And it means that you might have to shutter your doors because you'll be like, I'm so overwhelmed and I can't do this anymore. And I'm working too hard. And, the extreme of that idea is like, well, that's, you got to take ownership of that. You didn't set up your pace in a way that you could be sustainable, and now
that
you can't help
foundation.
anyone. Yeah. So
Not even yourself.
not even yourself now, and that's a bummer. And I don't like to see people in that spot. And so take care of yourself along the way and take care of your business. And boundaries are sexy, guys.
Yeah. No,
They're all
it's
the rage, so they should be in your business too.
how
So
are you? So, as an Enneagram 3
yeah.
and self employed and working from home and all of those things, like
Yeah.
that can be a super challenge of setting those boundaries for yourself.
Right.
How do you do that?
This is actually the first. It's a new phase of life right now because all my kids just started being in school. My youngest just started kindergarten.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've told people this, like in our church congregation. I'm like, feminism is overrated. I should be taking my victory lap right now. I should be, working out at 10 and lunching every day with ladies. No,
Ugh,
it's all tongue in cheek because I do. I love my work. But for me, it's now like I think I have an opportunity of like, what will this look like if I could craft a work day where I could be done when my kids come home from school,
mm.
and it's in those mamas who know and parents who know who've had their kids, like it's shorter than you think, especially if like,
Literally, you think you have all day, and then they're
right,
like back.
back, and you're like, what, already? And they're like, yeah, it's the same time every day. That's how time works. But for me, that's kind of what I'm trying to set up, or my new boundaries, or can I put in systems in place and still help who I want to help and show up the way I want to. And especially the blend of like, because there's the part of my service is like, helping with digital products is way more scalable than my one-on-one work. I can only bill so much. I can only help people because it just takes me a while
Mhm.
to read and review and redline a contract. It just does. And I can't, I'm good, and because I've been doing this for long enough, but there's still limits to that. But I can sell, an endless amount of contract templates, and I hear that Shopify cha-ching, in the middle of the night, and it's the greatest thing. My kids know now what that means. They're like, that means mama made money, and I'm like,
That's
that's
so
right,
cool.
that's
Yeah, I
right.
love that.
You get a new rug, and yeah, and we're going to the trampoline park, yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's so
whatnot.
good.
But yeah, so I think for me, it's boundaries. I'm trying to think about, what do I really want my life to look like? And really that's the question of what do you want your day to look like, right? What's the
Mm,
balance of moving my body and having fun things that fill up my heart and my mind, and time with my husband, and getting to enjoy where I live, which I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and it's we're a summer resort town, so our summers are really precious and short and beautiful. So I've tried to structure my business where I have a lot of flexibility in the summer, and
mm.
naturally things usually slow down because a lot of my clients are like me, mamas, and we're not launching in the summer. Like things, we're not shuttering our doors, but we're not
Yeah.
like doing any new things, and that works out really great. So those are kind of what I've used as my goalpost to try to fit things into. But it's a hard process that I'm still trying to figure out for sure. So
But
yeah.
also, it's like not something that you ever figure out. It's just awareness and keeping
Yes.
that awareness, that constant awareness of like, what do I want my life to look like and feel like? And it
Yeah.
really does go back to how you structure your days. And that's a really important reminder.
Yeah, for sure. I love my friend Michelle Gifford. She likes to hit 3 before 9. And so she's like, she likes to check in with God, higher power, whatever that looks like for people, move your body and get ready for the day.
That's
So
really cool.
I,
Yeah.
and I like to have that as a reminder of, especially, to get going on your day and then you can feel ready to watch your energy and what are the best times to be productive to help other people. When should you structure, content creation and
Yep.
admin tasks versus like your deep work. And that's always stuff I'm trying to learn more about because I think that is the challenge for sure when you work for yourself. And it's like, it's all very open-ended. The day could look like anything you want. Besides the scary people in your inbox, just wondering about that thing that you were going to send me. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're like, "Oh my gosh, my email didn't go through." Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, how did I forget?" Yeah, that's
How
a
did I
that's a
forget
bad
that?
feeling, but I actually love this idea too, and we can just touch on it quickly, is that
Yeah.
of recognizing what parts of your day you're productive in certain areas, because that's something I've been looking at, and I was always wondering why I would get home from work and like, da, da, da with the kids, and then I was like, "Okay, now I'm gonna clean my room." I just gotta
Right.
tell you, I cannot clean at 5, 6, 7, 8 at night ever. Like, I could probably clean at 1, 2 in the morning, or I can
Right.
clean at 7, 8, 9 in the morning, but, like, I it takes me probably 3 times as long to try to clean my room or organize or put away laundry in the afternoon, evening as it would at 1 in the morning or 7 in the morning, you know? So it's like,
Isn't that just wild? Like how our brains and energy work. But I think you're so smart is like just paying attention to that. And I loved, and I forget who it was who talked about, I think it was Julie Stoen. I love, and she's got a podcast and runs like Digital Insiders. And she's talked about like sacred time, especially when you work for yourself and you're a parent or a caretaker,
Mhm.
is being very careful not to do things like cleaning and making like all of that during the day because she's like, no, that's work that you can do with kids home and by your side, but
Mhm.
like recognizing that you sometimes have to be very intentional about blocking out your time and when to get your deep work done and when does that need to get done based especially on an interruption and when you are feeling in a good flow and don't waste that good time on stuff that doesn't need all your brain power.
Oh, that's so good. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, Brittany. Okay. Well, I hope that anyone listening who could use some learning from Brittany or also use her services will go to her Instagram, and you're just Brittany Ratelle, right?
I'm just my name, Brittany Ratelle.
Not
Yeah. So
just,
yeah.
you
No.
are. She is Brittany
That is
Ratelle.
another thing that I tell people all the time is quit saying just because you hear
Yeah.
it, especially from women. I'm just a little photographer. I just have an Etsy shop. I just have a food blog. And I'm like, correction, you run a 7-figure food media empire. I've seen the receipts. So can we just stop? Can we just stop saying just to
Mhm.
put yourself in a little box or maybe make
And to be clear,
yourself
that is
other.
not what I meant when I said your name.
No,
I
I
meant
know.
simply directly your name, no other
It
business
is.
fluff. It's just it is your
It's
name
just me, and
as your
that's my website.
Instagram.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and then my contract shop is all linked from there, but it's called Creative Contracts. So that's
yeah,
where I
and
sell my templates. Yeah.
literally there's so many options. I was scrolling through it just the other day. I think I actually put like 4 things in my cart of things that I know that I actually need to implement into my life and my
Right.
business and all of that. So, um well, we have to close with the 2 questions that are so important to me. So, what is
Okay.
something first that is currently lighting your heart on fire?
Ooh, this is such a good question. I am working on Chelsea and I were talking about I'm slowly decorating my house. Taking my time, but my room right next to me here is actually it's like a loft, kind of one of those open like on the second landing
Mhm.
of your house. And I'm turning it into our library and I'm going like dark academia, like moody.
Yes.
And I sent I'm actually helping this like e-designer is helping me, this girl, and my inspiration, I'm like basically like Hogwarts, like that Hogwarts meets Lord of the Rings in my super white house. Like not a challenge at all, right? Design wise. But anyway, I'm very excited about that. And my husband's has ordered these awesome bookshelves, these industrial looking ones. And so
So
I'm just so
cool.
excited because I'm a huge reader and that's something I'm trying to encourage that as part of our family culture with our kids. And so the idea of like curling up in that room in the evening and like like the lighting will be like lower and moody, and that we're all going to be like in there reading. Like that's the vision, that's
The
the dream.
feeling,
So
I think that you are so clear on what you want it to feel like.
yeah,
And I think that's exactly what you were telling at the very beginning of this podcast, is that you wanted to create this feeling around your business and all the things. And now here you
right,
are creating that same feeling in a different way, but a very specific type of feeling that will encourage certain behavior and certain like interactions and memories, which is that's awesome.
for
I actually
sure.
had a visual pop in my brain as soon as you started when you said what you were doing. I was like, oh, I could probably draw out what I think how I feel about what you were saying. So I love that.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
what is something that you do to protect the peace of your soul?
Mm, to protect the peace of my soul, I will say I try to, yeah, make time for, a daily devotional for me. I think is it's really important, and so, for me, sometimes that looks like listening to something that inspires me, doing some scripture reading, trying to be really grateful and intentional about the things that I've been given. I've been a huge believer in kind of the daily gratitude practice, and so
Mm,
that's something. And I kept one of those, 5 year journals where you would like write down things you were grateful for.
yeah.
I don't think I did the whole 5 years, but I think I did like three in it, and it was such a good practice, and it's something that I've tried to continue just doing on my own informally as I think about that. And so that's a great thing. In fact, I had keep a list on my phone of a grateful list about my husband specifically. And
Mm,
when we have like a little disagreement or a little tiff, there's just a little friction there. I look at that list and I make myself look at it, and I immediately things get put and zoomed out and perspective. And so
that's
that's been a
awesome.
practice that really helps me because he's amazing. Ashley Reeves has told me that I've been hiding him from the internet because his Instagram is private, and she's like, "Your husband's a thirst trap, and you've not been sharing him." And I'm like, I don't disagree with that designation at all. So we'll see if I can drag Mike Ratelle more onto the
Okay, I
online
can't
spotlight,
wait.
but
Yeah, he is a
because
secret to me.
he is a secret. But I mean, the joke is the irony. He's actually not, because he's a 6.5 foot tall man, over 315. Like he played football, and like he's a
Yeah,
big guy, and a big hunk of a man. So anyway,
that's
he's not a
awesome.
secret in any room that he's ever in. Certainly at any like sporting event, he's always like crunched in his seat because he feels bad that he's so tall.
That
But
is
yeah,
so funny. Ryan always jokes that he wants to be the person on he does not like go on social media. He doesn't want to be on social media hardly ever. He
right.
will every once in a while like show his face, but he's like, I'll just come on, but I want that blurred face. Like, how they blur people out.
Like the
He's like,
documentary, yeah,
yeah,
like
he's
the
like, I'll
witness
just be that
protection
always
program,
forever.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? I
I know,
love
and yeah.
I love the gratitude part of that because I do think that gratitude opens our eyes to something else. So when we're
Yes.
in a fight or we're feeling frustrated or like with our lives or ourselves or our relationships or business or anything, the gratitude kind of opens up our eyes to like what is good, and also like
Mhm.
it gives us the opportunity to look for other good things or other good options or other good direction. And sometimes when we're stuck in like that the suffering or the frustration,
Right.
we stop looking for anything else than that.
Yeah,
So
we close ourselves off to other information, and we're not
mhm,
using like our all the tools in our toolkit, like our mind
right.
and our body. We're not feeling the ground underneath our feet and the sun
Mhm.
shining into our eyes. We're not listening to the music on our playlist. Like we're starting to close ourselves off to this rich world that's around us. So I think even a practice of trying to be specific about that can make all the world a difference. So
And
yeah.
bring so much peace to your heart and to your life. I love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being willing. This was such like an informative podcast. I feel like it was a really great way to kind of like lessen the fear around what you do, or for any small business owner listening and saying like, oh, maybe it's not as scary, or maybe I didn't even realize that that's something that I needed or that I should be looking into. So I really wanted to have this conversation, and I appreciate your time so, so much, and your information and all that you're doing. And you are memorable and fun and wise. And I just think that you are the perfect fit for this job. So thank you so,
Oh,
so
well,
much.
thank you, Chelsea. You're so kind, and you're so kind because you're always telling people about me and throwing, people are you're telling people and sharing them about my name and throwing them my way. I
Because people
appreciate that
need you,
because
but they also don't want to like work in with someone who feels uncomfortable or like they can't relate to what they're like, now wait, what are you doing? Like, why
Right.
are they paying you? Like, you don't want to be questioned for what you're doing. And you have made yourself in a position where people feel safe and comfortable and super confident in what you offer, but also how you're going to respond and communicate about what they're doing with them. So it's awesome.
Well, thank you. So I feel like I've got the best job in the world. So I'm lucky to be able to work with, yeah, so many awful, I mean, not awful, amazing people doing
Yeah,
awesome things, not awful things,
no, I
awesome
get it.
things out there. And it's, yeah, what a cool time, right? To be an entrepreneur, to be, the
Seriously.
opportunities are endless, and like, let that inspire us, and not overwhelm us. So yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
you're welcome, Chelsea.
That's all we've got for today on the Dance of Growth podcast. One thing that would really help both myself and other women like you is if you would leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Or just share your favorite takeaway from today's episode on social media and tag me at Chelsea Christensen on Instagram. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember